Is it getting out of hand? Hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on a pair of classic wooden motor cruisers here in Victoria, British Columbia, with the loving memory of my pup Geordie and my lovely girlfriend Andrea, all the while fixing both boats up for some pretty ambitious cruising. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Absolutely lovely weather, but it's not snow. Okay, back into the forward head. All right. After a significant cleanup, we're ready to get back to it in here. And well, this is the project for this week. And you might say, okay, well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? But no, it isn't, not at all. I mean, we've got multiple curves in different directions and angles and twists. I have to maintain ventilation both from the ceiling here and the overheads through this vent here. I've got to pass some wires through to do some electrical up in here, some lighting, and I have to do some Cove lighting. And it's got to look brilliant. Okay, I have a plan. We'll see where it goes. I'm going to create a bulkhead down here that will follow along the edge of this timber, this deck timber, or carlin, or clamp, or I don't know what that even is. And that will come down to about here, which means I'm going to have to cope it, in other words, trim it around the detail on these beams, which I knew was coming, so that's okay. But I'm going to do it in white so that I can actually use some filler here if I have to. It's not going to be too complex. Okay, and below that, I'm going to come out with a bulkhead, not a traditional bulkhead, a flat piece here, which will create a little lip under which I can put a piece of trim and some LED lights behind to light the underside of the deck here. And that's what's in my head so far. If I'm going with that plan, I have to put at least a little bit more of the ceiling on here, so I'm going to get started with that and hope it all sort of comes together in my head. I'm sure it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand as you see it develop over the next few minutes than it is going to be for me to develop over the next few days. Okay, this is going fabulously and I'm seeing how it's all going to come together, but before I get too excited, I need to do some wiring. First off, a very clever fellow, one of you, thank you very much, suggested I put a little strip lighting in my little mahogany box up here that will highlight the registration numbers and cast a lovely warm glow on this mahogany that's going to be here. I'd already intended to put a Cove up here that would have strip lighting in it that would uplight all this beadboard, and I will need to put two pot lights, one around here somewhere directly over the sink and one mirror image on the other side. So I should get all that wiring done before it gets hard to do anything up here. Now what's happening up here will be somewhat removable, but I'd rather get it right the first time. So let's fish a little wire here. This wire is marine grade tinned 16 gauge 2 conductor safety wire. In other words, the ground is yellow, and that is the modern standard for marine boating wire, to make sure you don't ever confuse negative 12 volt with live 110 volt. Okay, so I'm gonna have to drill a hole back here because the junction box for all this electrical is going to be in the back of this closet. So I'll get on that. There we go. In this case, I'm just gonna run it through the vent here and down to the other end, and I'll be able to retrieve it when I put drill some pot lights here. We'll cut that about there, giving us enough wire to go over and back. I'll just store it up here in the meantime. Good morning. Well, I've given this some thought overnight, and I'm going to change it. Such is the nature of real-time design. Not a lot, just a little. Let's see if I can get anywhere with it. This comes off. Okay, so the problem is I was trying to create a surface here that followed the shape of the hull, which I assumed this timber would do, and then create a place to put a panel at this point and a sort of small bulkhead at this point. And this wasn't really properly lined up, actually, so it just turned into a bit of a mess of too many things stuck together. So what I'm going to do is actually just put a piece of yellow cedar like this right on here following this curve. So to do that, I'm just going to equally space these out. Okay, so I've installed a little block here with a miter dent on it so that I can set my piece in place hard against it, because this is a very difficult piece to get the exact length of. So basically I just keep shortening it and trying to press it in on the curve until it fits, and we're not quite there yet. So let's pop that back, pop that back out and shorten it. There's no doubt this is an awful lot of work for a relatively simple thing. It's just, I really want it to be nice. Okay. And then because none of the beams are actually at the same height, I'm having to put little spacers in on the back supports here, and then I'll bring them back down. This one has to go down slightly. There we go. Ever so slightly. Okay, it is yet another day, and I have given this even more consideration. I'm happy with where I'm going. What I do need to do, though, is paint. Because I've decided that all of the remaining wood here will actually be mahogany, and therefore I have to get everything painted done, because I do not want to be cutting in around the mahogany. And there's a fair amount to be done before we get there. As you know, I have filled some of these joints and it looks like it's pretty good, but there's a lot of little finicky sanding and cleaning in bits, so that's today not terribly interesting. Okay, so we're going to do some LED strip lighting up forward, and if you've been watching at all, you know that I like this, what they call chip on board, or COB LED strips. Basically, there's lots of tiny LEDs inside this silicone diffuser, and that makes for a uniform strip of light, and I can show you what that'll look like in a second. Now, when you buy these spools, and I'll put a link down below because this is my very, very favorite version of this. It's a nice warm light at 300K, and it's COB. It's easy to solder to. I just love it. Anyway, it'll come with a wire already attached to one end, and that's fine for the first piece you use, but unless you're using the full length, at some point you're gonna have to cut it and reconnect somewhere. Now, there are little plastic crimp-on kind of connectors that punch 2 pins through these little brass strips that you can see here, and they work for about a week. As far as I'm concerned, they're absolute rubbish. I don't trust them at all. So I like to solder directly onto these little pads, and I'll show you how I do that. On this particular COB, or this particular strip, the little brass pads, or whatever they are actually covered with a shellac of some sort. So I like to sand them off. In fact, I don't like to do it. It's absolutely essential. So I just take a little bit of sandpaper on edge and just slide it back and forth here across this. And it cleans it up nice and bright. Hopefully you can see that. I'm doing it on the second pad in because it's too hard to hold it at the end. I'll just recut it. I'll turn that around and I'll do the other side. There we go, nice and clean. And with those pads cleaned up, I will recut it at the edge of those pads. Okay, now in the world of soldering, we have 2 steps. One is tinning, which applies a little solder to each thing you're going to solder to, in this case the pads and the wire, and then the final step is actually soldering them together. So let's get started. Now, I've never had the luxury of one of those clamps for doing soldering work, so I basically have to improvise. Okay, nice little lightweight soldering iron, and one of the greatest tips I've ever learned about soldering is keep the tip clean. Yes, I could have a more exotic way of doing that. Normally I use steel wool, but there are purpose-made things for that. Okay, so I like to put a little puddle of solder on the iron and then let that flow across because it makes for really good heat transfer. Nice little puddle right on the pad. Nice. We'll do the other side. Little puddle. And you can tell when the pad is hot enough because the puddle will stretch out across the pad. Okay, now for the pigtails, I'm just using a short section of the marine wire that I'm going to connect all these lights up with. And this is 16 gauge. Now, you might say, why don't you just skip the whole pigtail section and go straight to wiring onto the wire wherever they happen to be coming from? And I'll tell you why. Because I like to be able to do a really good job of the soldering work here on, well, what resembles a bench. And crawling around in the forward head does not give me that same level of confidence. Give them the happy little twist on the short ones that are going to be soldered. And we're off. Now for me, tinning wires has always meant let the solder just hang there and bring the wire and the iron to the solder. Now if the boat wasn't rocking violently, this would be a little easier. Again, a little puddle of solder on the bottom of the iron allows the heat to flow into the wire much, much better. There we go. We have a nice puddle formed around there. That'll be just great. All right, let's do the other one. And when you see that flux burning away there, you know you've got a nice little puddle ready to go. Okay, next step. I do need a soldering iron holder though. You can see I've had a couple of little, come on, just stay right there, stay. Okay, back to my clamp setup here with the battery. This should work just fine. You can read very, very tiny little numbers here, or symbols here for positive and negative. Again, I place it on to begin with, get the heat going, make sure that it's melted both, remove the heat, make sure it's held steady for a few seconds, and you're good. Let's come around and do the other one. There we go. Make sure it's nice and liquid. Remove the heat. And you've got a great connection. Last step, a little shrink tube. Another nice thing about making pigtails is that if you forget to put the shrink tube on in advance, you still have a chance. Okie doke. Around there.
In this particular situation, as it starts to shrink down around the wires, I actually give it a bit of a pinch there to actually keep the wires separated, and so that they're not putting any stress on twisting them. All right, finally, we test. I happen to have a 12-volt supply handy here, and we can have a look at how these look. There we go. Very nice, very nice, very nice. And that's the last one done. Just had enough, thank goodness. Again, I'll put a link down below to this particular brand of COB strip lighting, because it's fantastic. And in fact, several of these spools have been gifts from you kind people, so thank you very much. Speaking of gifts, oh my gosh, some Christmas presents came in, and these all came in from Marie and Tom. Thank you ever so much. First off, some silicone heater hose. This is lovely, lovely, lovely stuff, and this will be used for the central heating here aboard Geordie. Secondly, these are inner tubes. I'm not going to take them out of the packaging. They're tiny little inner tubes for tiny little... I'm going to go show you. Just hang on. Here we go. Aren't these the cutest? These are beaching wheels. In other words, tiny wheels that you can put on the back of the dinghy. And these were gifted to me as well by a neighbor here, but the tires were shot. And if I can do this without pinching my wheels, my fingers, these clip onto bolts, studs on the back of the dinghy, and you pull these levers and up the wheels come. So they're out of the way so you can go dinghying. And then when you get to shore, you slide them down and latch them down, and you can pull the dinghy up onto the shore on wheels. I've never used them because I've never been able to find inner tubes for them, but now I have them. Pretty excited. Next season we will be rolling up on the beaches. Okay, also from Marie and Tom, another spool of the fabulous marine wire that I use for everything on the boat. To be fair, this is the 14 gauge that I use for most of the larger circuits. The wiring you just saw me do is LED lighting. I use a 16 gauge, a little smaller. Lastly, also from them, is a new little ammeter voltmeter for AC. I know these are really, really sweet. Let me show you. I use them in my electrical panel here, and I did this quite some time ago. You can see there's one here that's functioning. This one is dead, thus the requirement for the replacement. The way I've got this panel set up, and I won't go into it to too much detail because we're going to talk about it again soon. This is the AC side. So this is our current AC current coming in from shore power at 113 volts, a little low. It's winter, everyone on the dock has their heater on, and the number of amps I'm drawing off shore power. This would be what's coming to the panel. In other words, what's coming from the inverter if I was not on shore power. Normally this would still be lit up and it would be very similar to those numbers. However, I killed this meter because my old inverter, in fact my current inverter, is a modified square wave, and the electronics in this little box could not tolerate that. So I will not actually install this until I get a pure sine wave inverter so I don't cook the other one. And just to finish up the story, on the other side, I have the same thing for the DC side. So there's my DC at the battery, current coming in or out of the battery, currently very little because we're just trickle charging. And here's my DC at the panel, and the current coming in or off the panel, which is again pretty small because it's basically just running the lights. Anyway, that's the basic gist of what's going on in this panel. There's lots yet to be done here, which we'll talk about in the future. Incidentally, I'm putting all these same meters on MV Poem because I just love to see that spread of information, which again, I will delve into at another time. Thanks so much, Marie and Tom. And good morning. Okay, well, this is about the third change of plans this week, and I'm not going to go on about it too much, but no, I'm not going to do the finished painting. I'm going to do the finished trim work and just tack it in place and make sure everything's aligned properly in case I have to make any other modifications, and then I will remove it, do the finish. I think you know where I'm going. Let's get carried on with doing this. All right then, so we're going to rip some strips off this sapili plywood, and I'm going to be careful with it. I'd rather not mar the good side. 8-inch strips. Done with the ripping guide. Much simpler than the table saw. Again, cutting with the good side down to make the best possible edge. Alrighty.
Okay, the pieces I'm making now are to go under this structure here and connect the very curved surface of this ceiling with the very curved edge I want to have for my cove lighting up here. So I need to figure out what the actual angle is on the side. Then I'm going to use this to help me figure that out. I have to put a straight board on here because of course the one that's there already is at a pretty severe curve. Okay, that will get me close enough. Okay, I've got the first one cut, and now for the other end. Swing this all the way around. I think this work justifies a new blade in the old saw, which is a good opportunity to thank Luke Winters, Robert Henning, and Gary Deschamps, who recently came aboard as new crew members via PayPal. Thank you all ever so much. And Gary, in fact, suggested it was time for a new blade or two, so I've gone out and got one, and let's just put it on. For the last little while, I've been using these Diablo blades. I'm not sure they're the best. It's not an endorsement, but they've certainly worked well for me. The blade I use is actually a 40 tooth, which is not very fine, but it actually seems to be a perfectly good combination blade for this little Makita. Okay, so let's get this off. And we're off to the races. Okay, so let's see how this fits. Beauty! It even holds up in place. Okay, so now we have to scribe this edge. Okay, I'm just going to do a handy dandy finger scribe here. And yes, I'm going to use this marker because I want a really good mark, and I don't really mind as I'm going to take off a fair amount of material anyway. So I want to really be able to see this. Okay, let's do it. And I don't want to cut this with a circular saw because I don't want to be pulling the saw up through the good side of the wood. So we'll do this with the table saw. And because the blade is now below, it pulls down through the wood so I can put the good side up. And of course, eye protection. And then with the outside done, let's scribe the inside edge. Okay, let's see. Okay, that feels great now. Just jam it in and stays nicely, and now I have the exact same reveal here and all the way along. That looks great. Okay, next step. We need some little panels in here. Now, the trick was, when I was first thinking about doing this, I thought I was going to have to scribe these around this profile down here, but I'm not going to have to at all because I'm only going to see these from about halfway up because the front edge of the lighting cove is going to hide it. So I'm pretty sneaky hack here. Okay, let's get some pieces in here. Okay, and of course these need a miter on the back side to sit up against here. So let's see if that's gonna work. Yeah, that one's just nice. Now I'm just going to tack these because they're gonna come back down again. Nice. And 2 and 3. Okay, so this is the inside curve. Well, it should be underneath, but I think you know what I mean. So if you look at it from underneath, I'm going to put this batten of yellow cedar on it and flex it in a curve. That's why I cut it nice and thin so that it will support the front edge of the cove. Anyway, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Let me just put this all together. Get some glue on here. And I'm going to work my way along here and put some pins in and clamp it. Making a gluey mess. Excellent. Okay, so we'll toss this back up with an absolute minimum of pins, and that'll hold it in place while we figure out the next step, which is the actual piece that'll cover across the front. But as you can already see, you cannot see behind these things anymore. Okay, so this piece is just a piece of 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch sapele mahogany with miters on the end. And let's see how that fits. Very, very nice. Very nice. Okay, excellent, excellent. Now for the fun part. Woohoo! This now comes back off again momentarily, which is very simple, to install the strip lighting that I set up a little bit earlier, right along this edge. Now I cut this a little long just to be on the safe side. And go right to there. Beauty. And then this back up. And the Cove piece on. And then just about exactly what I was hoping for. Let's turn off this big work light. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's just what I was hoping for. There'll be an additional light here as well, and of course the little puck lights up here. But the question was, do I also want some tiny little pin pucks under here? Is it getting out of hand?